When it comes to accountability from law enforcement in Florida, things continue to get scarier. It seems like every day law enforcement in Florida finds new ways to deprive people of information. And today's story is pretty scary. By the way, this story was first reported out of the Jacksonville News, so shout outs to them for staying on top of this. Now, if you guys remember, a while back, we did a video of the top 10 worst sheriff's departments in Florida. So this video got over 25,000 views like 4 months ago on our channel. It was a video about the law enforcement agencies in Florida that had the worst public reputation. Now, by chance, there's a few counties in Florida that have stopped publishing arrest reports. And would you guess that it just happens to be that the counties in Florida and one in Georgia that have stopped reporting arrest reports were also the counties that just by chance happen to be on our list of law enforcement agencies in Florida that the public trusted the least? Now, in that video, we had talked about how counties here in this circle that I have highlighted had the worst reputation with the public in the state of Florida. These are the law enforcement agencies that, according to the public, based on our comments and our research on the ground, have the worst reputation in the state of Florida. Now, would you guess that the 3 counties that have stopped publishing arrest records to the public happen to be in that area of Florida? If you've been watching my channel, we've talked extensively about how these law enforcement agencies in that corner of the state have the worst reputation. On top, you have Camden County, Georgia, just north of Jacksonville. You have Flagler County, which we recently did a tour of. And you have, of course, good old St. Johns County right outside of Jacksonville. Now, these counties up here extensively covered most of the places on that list. These are the counties in Florida that have the worst reputation: Volusia, Brevard, St. Johns County. Flagler County wasn't on the list, but it would have been in that list very closely. And of course, Camden County is on the Georgia side, so that didn't make our list. But it's interesting to see that the counties that have the worst reputation, even to make my list of that previous video, just by chance happen to be the same out of 67 counties in Florida, right? Just happen to be that those are the counties that don't want to publish arrest records now all of a sudden. Why? Let's find out. And by the way, I'm not biting this story off of the Jacksonville News. I'm just putting my own personal spin on it. I just find it interesting that it's the counties in Florida with the worst reputation for accountability and the law enforcement agencies that people in Florida are most afraid of happen to be the same ones that now all of a sudden can't publish their arrest reports. Now, according to the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, they're saying that the reason why they're no longer going to report their arrest records is because criminals are allegedly using that information to scam the family members of inmates. Who knew that the state of Florida all of a sudden cared about the family members of inmates, right? So that's already suspicious because that doesn't sound like the typical agenda of a sheriff's office in Florida like St. Johns County. But the point being, guys, that these sheriff's offices in this region of Florida are now no longer going to be uploading the inmate arrest logs, which keeps the public informed of who comes in and out of the jails. Now, if I had to take an educated guess on the real reason why these law enforcement agencies in Florida do not want these arrest reports published, I would have to say that they're up to something really suspicious. After all, transparency is the hallmark of most law enforcement agencies, but this action is actually the most contradictory to that statement you could think of. After all, every county in the United States reports their law enforcement arrests. For counties in Florida to all of a sudden say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore, that definitely raises an eyebrow, especially considering the reputation that these law enforcement agencies have with, what's the word I've used in my videos 100 times in the past? Due process. So imagine this: law enforcement agencies that have the most questionable reputation in Florida for not giving people due process all of a sudden don't want you to know who is in their system. Now, this comes in the midst of law enforcement agencies like the Lee County Sheriff's Office in Florida involved in so many scandals, it's unreal. They're talking about allegedly the FBI investigating their sheriff Marcino. On top of that, they say over like 180 Lee County Sheriff's officers had donated money to the campaigns of people in local offices, which it's not technically illegal, but it does raise some eyebrows why law enforcement agencies are donating money to people in office. So in other words, there are scandals involving law enforcement all over Florida right now. And without a doubt, the biggest scandal right now is the lack of due process with how the homeless are being arrested. If I had to take an educated guess on why these particular counties are not going to be releasing their arrest records, I would say is that these are going to be the first counties in Florida that are going to start to arrest homeless people under the new homeless law that just passed in Florida. And the reason they don't want the arrest records to be public is because they don't want lawyers throughout the entirety of the United States to know who these homeless people are that are being arrested, because they know they're likely to get sued under the new law. So most law enforcement agencies in Florida have not arrested anybody under the new homeless law. The reason is that they're afraid they're going to get sued. So imagine now these counties in Florida that are actually going to start to arrest homeless people under the new law don't want those reports to be made to the public because they know they're going to get sued for it, and they know they're acting outside of due process. So my guess of why this is really happening is very concerning. They're about to start to actually arrest the homeless people in Florida, and they don't want anybody to know who's being arrested. Now, keep in mind, we've made videos on our YouTube channel how the homeless people feel that they're not just getting arrested, they're outright disappearing. Many homeless people in Florida believe that the homeless are not being arrested, they're outright disappearing. So imagine now, in the state of Florida, where the homeless population is facing a law that they can get arrested for being homeless, they're afraid they're literally disappearing, and then all of a sudden, these law enforcement agencies that have the worst reputation with dealing with the homeless people with due process decide that they're not going to publish who they arrest. If this isn't a red flag to what's going on in the state of Florida when it comes to due process and transparency of law enforcement, I don't know what is. And it isn't a surprise that these are the particular counties that are starting to implement this. Now, the reason, the excuse that they have is that allegedly people from Alabama inside the Alabama prison system are scamming the family members of people in Florida. What raises an eyebrow is that I'm interviewing homeless people who are disabled and their family members are taking their SSI checks. And if you try to make reports about that, they do nothing about it. So it's not like law enforcement in Florida is that proactive at stopping scams, especially scams that are targeting the families of criminals. So this doesn't check out in any way. It's actually very concerning that this is happening. But imagine that. And again, this is something where we've already made videos on this topic. And what's interesting about this story is that we have already identified from previous videos on our channel which law enforcement agencies have the worst reputation for due process. So we've already identified these counties as places the public in general doesn't trust. So imagine now that these are the counties that are telling us that they're no longer going to publish arrest reports. And does that set precedent for other counties in Florida to do the same thing? Very scary. Now, I can't tell you everything I've heard from these particular law enforcement agencies as I talk to homeless people throughout the state of Florida. But some of these counties in Florida, there are some horrendous stories from homeless people on the things that have happened to them at the hands of law enforcement. So imagine now that the law enforcement agencies that have the absolute worst reputation, and I've said that before these changes took place, so we've already established that these agencies have the worst reputation. Now those happen to be the same agencies that are implementing this new change where they're not publishing who they're arresting at a time when we know that homeless people are being targeted more than ever with lack of due process. Now, they do say that the media will be allowed to access these files, but here's a problem that we've also extensively covered on our YouTube channel. You may have seen the video on my YouTube channel where I'm arguing with the records department, respectfully, right? Arguing with people at records in Manatee County, Florida, about how they are not letting YouTubers like me be considered media and have access to things quicker, promptly. So who these agencies in Florida consider media is who their friends are media. So this is something like North Korea or Venezuela or Cuba, where only preferred media outlets will have access to information, and people who actually want access to information, like myself, are not able to obtain it. So these law enforcement agencies are telling the public that they don't have to worry because they're allowing the media to have access to this information, and we can trust that the media will get the proper information. Okay, all the while, here's the scenario that I'm currently having with the Manatee County Sheriff's Office. When the New Wake News and NBC2, when those people come in here and they request the same type of footage, they get that in a week.
I didn't deal with that.
So when we see a police arrest or something that's newsworthy on the news, you're telling me that they don't get it in 5 days?
I'm telling you what our procedure is.
Why isn't the procedure applied to them? Whose palms am I not greasing? Whose palms am I not greasing? Why do they get it in 5 days? Why are you making this a 2-month delay?
That's not how it works.
That's how you're telling me it works. That's how you're telling me it works.
I'm not. I'm telling you what our procedure is. If you would like.
That's your procedure for social media, for media?
That is our procedure.
For news purposes?
That is our procedure.
So how do people get this stuff in 5 days?
I don't know.
You do know, you work here. So just so we understand, I currently have a situation with Manatee County Sheriff's Office where they're not letting me get the same media access as their 2 or 3 preferred news networks. But the St. John's Sheriff's Office is saying, hey, you don't have to worry. We're hand feeding a few people here. If it's relevant, they'll get it. But on the other hand, I'm already having trouble getting that information from sheriff's offices. So what makes you think this is really reliable? It's definitely questionable. And their statement that if anybody needs this stuff, they can get it, absolutely not true. So the state of Florida is head on going into a battle to see how much they can get away with when it comes to due process, when it comes to dispensing information to the public. The issue really here is that in times past, before the advancements of technology, law enforcement agencies had to have much less accountability. But today with technology, it's getting in the way of them operating the court systems the way they want. That is because the court systems are trying to continue with antiquated methods and technology. Many times, you don't even need a lawyer. If you're going to a courtroom right now to defend an injury and you have video footage of what happened, you don't need a lawyer. Lawyers don't want you to defend your own cases because then they're out of the business. So lawyers, when you're able to defend your own cases, are telling you you don't have a case. Not because you don't have a case, because they are recognizing that it's getting to the point where the lawyer's job has become obsolete because individuals have so much access to information that it turns their lawyers, judges, their entire judicial system is absolutely obsolete because it's antiquated. And with today's technology, people can do their own research, find their own things, do their own things, and they no longer need to depend on this antiquated system, which they have used to make themselves very rich and very powerful. These law enforcement agencies are about to set precedent in the state of Florida that agencies can get away with not having to report arrest records. Arrest records which are being used by individuals to follow stories, pull Freedom of Information Act requests, and many times be able to get the right narrative of a story versus the portrayed narrative of law enforcement. Take a look at this footage from a recent video I made. It's a story that happened right here in St. Johns County. Number 3, St. Johns County. This county has made an infamous reputation for being a police profiling county. A police officer had a heart attack while needlessly beating a Guatemalan immigrant who, one, was doing nothing at all wrong. He was outside of a hotel. He apparently had the right to be here because he had some type of work visa. Well, literally, the guy was doing absolutely nothing wrong. The police officer saw him, noticed that he was Guatemalan, and went on to police profile him. In the act of beating and trying to detain this person who was on the phone with his mother and was doing absolutely nothing wrong, he wasn't trespassing. He was outside of a hotel he paid for. He had all the right to be there. Nobody had made a police complaint. This police officer just decided to pick on this guy because he was Guatemalan in St. Johns County. Well, it turns out that the police officer had a heart attack and died. He was so excited in his fanatical endeavor to beat the crap out of a Guatemalan that he gave himself a heart attack and died. Well, the St. John's Police Department tried to arrest the person for manslaughter, saying that he caused the death of this police officer when nobody had called him. He wasn't trespassing. He was a guest at a hotel. He had all the right to be there. Eventually, it took a while, but the St. John's Police Department did have to drop the charges and let this innocent guy go, and now they're being sued. So here's a scenario where they're going to lock this guy away for a very long time for manslaughter of a police officer. A few people pulled this Freedom of Information Act request, and it shows that the guy was innocent. They eventually had to drop the charges. But what's interesting is that the St. Johns County Sheriff stood behind the officer, portrayed the person maliciously, but when the real information came out, they had to backtrack, release the person, and now they're even being sued over it. Up front, the St. John's Police Department knew exactly all the details of this case before the media, and they still decided to portray this person maliciously. But when everybody else got a hold of the information, they had to backtrack on their stance. So it's one of those scenarios where when people have access to information, law enforcement cannot paint the narrative that they want to paint. And many times we've seen with the St. John Sheriff's Office that their intentions were not wholesome. And the incident with the Guatemalan immigrant is a perfect example of how they will portray something in a very misleading way to the audience, trying to lock somebody away forever when the person really was treated with lack of due process. A lot of police misinformation given to the media by the people that are the spokesperson for this county. So we know that they have a reputation that's questionable. And really, I'm not going to give you guys 100 examples, but these are just a few instances where the St. John's Sheriff's Department has proven to the public that we can't really trust their intentions and motives. And you can't make the same statement for Corler County or Broward County. This is a unique thing to St. John's Sheriff's Office. That's the way they roll. Keep in mind that St. John's County is now the safest county in Florida analytically, but they're working outside of due process to obtain those results. If they played by the rules like everybody else, then they wouldn't be the safest county in Florida. And this is really a scenario where a sheriff's office is doing everything they can to manipulate information and access to information so they can continue trying to claim to be the best county in Florida, but in reality, the methods that they're using are methods that other law enforcement agencies in Florida are not doing because they actually do things the right way. So, yeah, it's easy when you don't play by the rules to be the winner. If you cheat, you can win. So their explanation is that they can no longer publish arrest reports because scammers in Alabama are starting to scam people pretending to be bail bondsmen, requesting money from people's families of people who are arrested. That's absurd. You're telling me that now you can't report who's being arrested because somebody might get scammed? There are thousands of law enforcement agencies in the United States. It just so happens to be that St. Johns County, the safest county in Florida analytically, happens to be the weakest link out of all of them, and this is the county that can't publish arrest records because somebody might get scammed? So let's get this understood. The county that is the safest in the state of Florida has to shut down their reporting of arrest reports because of scammers from another state. That doesn't even check out. There are counties in this country, in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, that wish they had a quarter of the operational cost per capita of St. Johns County. And then to state that the threat is coming from another state's correctional facilities. This is absolutely absurd. If you really were perpetrating this scam, you wouldn't target the safest county in Florida. You would target a rural county somewhere in America that doesn't have the resources, that doesn't have cyber counterintelligence units like I'm sure this law enforcement agency should have. I mean, Lee County has it, Corler County has it, so I'm pretty sure they have it as well. Why would scammers target the safest county in Florida when this is a state that has well-funded police departments, particularly in the field of cybersecurity? Other states like Alabama, Indiana, for example, they don't have the same funding. They don't have the same resources to be able to pull off any type of counter-reactive measure to somebody doing a scam like this, targeting a sheriff's office. This is absolutely difficult to swallow. And the notion that the people who made this come to light are bail bondsmen and lawyers. Now, if you guys remember, I recently talked about on our channel how it's actually lawyers that are behind the situation with the homeless law. That's a whole different topic there, but that should give you another clue to the real motive and intention. It is actually lawyers and bail bondsmen who are actually pushing this measure, and we know that lawyers are the reason why Florida's homeless law took effect. I made a short on my YouTube channel that talked a little bit about the real reason why the homeless law came into effect in Florida. To summarize that, lawyers will now be able to sue municipalities, and they'll be able to represent the business and the municipality. So wherever there's a homeless problem, those businesses will be able to sue the municipality. Lawyers can represent both sides of that. And the real intention of the new homeless law is to allow for litigation, which of course is taxpayer money that goes right into the pockets of lawyers. So it would only make sense that these homeless people that are being arrested are only really being arrested in order for these lawyers to be able to have litigation. This is a problem that the state of Florida has, where lawyers will create needless litigation in order to drain public funds. And in Fort Myers, Florida, I've even heard stories of lawyers doing that within HOAs to basically steal people's properties, where they create these massive endless hurdles of litigation where they profit by charging people for litigation that they created. Because if you're in an HOA, you have to pay any type of legal fee that your HOA inquires. So lawyers will move in, buy these places, start suing each other back and forth, creating endless legal litigation that the HOA has to pay for. Now they're trying to implement that same system where municipalities can be sued by businesses for a homeless problem. So is it any surprise now that these agencies are saying that the reason that they have to do this is to protect lawyers and bondsmen whose reputations are being harmed by scammers who are pretending to be them? Get the crap out of here. They're the reason why this is happening. And it's crazy that me, from a distance, can just sit here, watch this whole thing unfold, and understand the motives and intentions of these individuals. So when things are happening in the state of Florida, they're always portrayed a certain way, but it doesn't take much to figure out the real motives and intentions. And it's sad. It's sad that they have to work in just deprived ways. But again, St. Johns County didn't become the safest county in Florida by working with due process. They became the safest county in Florida by exploiting all these inconsistencies of legalities that other counties morally and ethically will not go to those extremes to try to portray like they're doing a good job when they're really not. The overwhelming majority of the time, law enforcement does an admirable job when these Freedom of Information Act requests are made. But in the case of St. Johns County, you really do have to question the intentions and motives, being that their reputation is to do everything outside of due process possible to, on paper, appear to be the safest county in Florida. But in reality, again, if you cheat and you bend the rules in your favor, you can win. And if you're winning by cheating, it isn't a legitimate win. This is a very concerning precedent in the state of Florida, because I feel that if this works for them and they're able to get away with this, other law enforcement agencies are going to follow the same lead and start to omit even more information that I do believe the public is entitled to. And it isn't good that the state of Florida continues to find ways to deprive people of information about what's happening in the state. It's counter logic that you would try to limit information about what's happening. If you care about the public safety, the number one thing you want is disbursement of information. Disbursement of information leads to public safety. Why a law enforcement agency would do the complete opposite only raises eyebrows. But this is an agency that has already demonstrated their intentions. They became the safest county on paper in Florida by working outside of due process to get rid of people they don't want in their county, which other counties wouldn't go to those extents of violating due process. In other words, they cheated their way to the top to be the safest county in Florida. And then on top of that, we saw the situation with the Guatemalan guy down there. That was horrific. You know, it's incredible how a law enforcement agency would go out, make a public statement like that, and then have everything flip on them and the truth come out. You can clearly see their motives and intentions and malicious intentions in the way they've handled things in the past. So why would we trust that now the reason they're doing this is logical? Besides, after all, every agency in the country does this. This is not good for Florida. They continue to find ways to make Florida a more oppressive state with less transparency. And how could people not question your motives when you already have a reputation of not doing things for the right reasons? St. Johns County wants to continue to, on paper, appear like the best place to live in Florida, but I don't see no rich people moving there. The rich people keep moving to Boca and Naples, so It doesn't matter how hard you try to cover up everything and conceal all the things that are happening here. You can, on paper, look like the safest county in Florida, but are rich people going to move to there? No, because everybody already knows what the gimmick is of you guys. So it's like one of those deals where, like, you can portray to be the best place. I wouldn't move to St. Johns County. When somebody tells me to move to St. Johns County, are you kidding me? To be profiled by the police because they don't want my demographic there. So yeah, no, it isn't one of those deals where you can on paper be the safest county in Florida. But am I going to move to St. Johns County? Absolutely not. Are rich people from New York going to move to St. Johns County? Absolutely not. They're going to keep going to Boca and Naples because these are people that they're smarter than that. So it's one of those deals where you can portray whatever you want, but you can't fool people. People aren't stupid. We have access to information, and people know when something doesn't smell right, it ain't right. It's pretty straightforward. I'm sure if you tuned into North Korean radio right now, they would have nothing but majestic things to say about North Korea, but most of us aren't fooled by it. So you can tell yourself whatever you want, but most people aren't stupid enough to go for it. But there it is. A few counties in Florida have decided that they're not going to publish arrest reports anymore because of the fear of scammers. Oh no, these horrific scammers. Unbelievable. The intentions of why they're really doing this raise eyebrows. This is not something people are actually going to believe. There's something else going on here. And mark my words, if they're able to get away with this, Putnam County, Volusia, Brevard are going to be the next counties to implement these changes. Maybe even Lee County, Florida. I put it in that order. Those are the next counties to come up with this whole. If this thing keeps going, those are going to be up next. Duval County might be next too. I don't see Tampa doing this. I don't see Corler County doing this. I don't see Broward and Palm Beach doing this. I don't see Dade County doing this. I don't see Alachua County doing this. I don't see Orange and Seminole doing this. I don't see Leon County doing this. I see Bay County doing this, Brevard, the usual suspects. Yeah, you're not going to have counties that have a good reputation start to do this. You're going to see counties that have a questionable reputation doing this. So, for example, I don't see Corler doing this, Brevard. Usual suspects. Who is logical, guys? This is logical. Come on now.